Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack 4 Business Podcast. Over 300 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game. Are you ready to discover what your Knack 4 business truly is? Your hosts are Bernie France-Grode from Creative Insight and Wayne Pratt from Motive 8U Inc.
Today's topic is Unlock Growth and Podcasting Power Proven Strategies to Elevate Your Influence. How do you get in front of the right audience without spending a fortune on ads or chasing cold leads? That's exactly what Mark will break down. How podcast guesting helps entrepreneurs, authors, and small business owners build authority, grow visibility, and attract the right clients by sharing their message on shows that already have their ideal audience. If you're ready to turn conversations into conversions and want a smarter way to grow your brand, tune in now and discover how podcast guesting could be your most powerful marketing. Mark Hayward from Podcast Introduction Group, co-founder of that group and recognized expert in podcast guesting and business growth. With nearly 2 decades of experience expanding over both corporate and entrepreneurial worlds, Mark helps entrepreneurs, authors, and thought leaders grow their visibility and credibility by landing high-impact podcast guest spots that align with their brand and business goals. He's also the host of Business Growth Talks, where for over 7 years he's interviewed top business minds to uncover proven strategies for scaling, customer retention, and financial growth. Mark's background includes leading digital transformation projects with the Big Four consultancies and managing global teams, making him equally fluent in corporate strategy and startup agility. Whether he's guiding clients through the podcasting landscape or sharing practical business insights, Mark brings clarity, energy, and results-focused thinking to every conversation. Hey, Mark, welcome from the UK. Do you have a favorite quote or saying?
Favorite quote was advice I was given to by my mentor that I worked with for about 6 years in corporate world. And it was a Bruce Lee quote, and I'm not massively into sort of Bruce Lee, but it was a great quote, which was, Bruce Lee never worried about the person that learnt 1,000 different kicks. He was only worried about the people that practiced one kick thousands and thousands of times. So that way of drilling down and getting into a subject and going deep into it, I think is incredibly important, whether you're in a corporate background, whether you're running a business, but just getting very geared into your area and understanding that and becoming an expert in it, I think can be so powerful for business owners.
1,000 times the one kick. Yep. Become the subject matter expert. What turned on the light with podcasting?
So I started podcasting as a host while I was still in my corporate career. And I was starting to do talks to industry leaders about some of the subjects we were covering in building software and transforming organizations with software. I started to agonize over every word that I was saying, and I'd do my day's work, finish at 7 p.m. and then be spending another hour, 2 hours working on these talks. So I decided to buy a microphone. I got very basic software and I chose a subject. I was a lot into personal development and business ideas. I'd click record to speak for 10 to 15 minutes and I'd post it up. I had no idea that it was going to grow into what it started, what it's grown into. But the starting point was very much just, like people say, finding your voice, trying to make myself a better communicator, whether it's internally or externally. That grew into doing interviews, and now we're predominantly an interview-based show. I do some solo episodes as well, but predominantly it's interviews to expand people's minds and get tips and strategies about their business.
First off, how do you define podcast guesting? And then how does that wrap into the business growth?
So podcast guesting is appearing on other people's shows as a guest and talking about your area of expertise, your knowledge and your experience, and why people would be interested in buying your product or service. Most of our clients are business owners or entrepreneurs. We also work with authors as well, but most of them are non-fiction authors. So it's being able to appear on their shows and be able to sell a product or service by telling stories. My show, which is called Business Growth Talks, is very much coupled with podcast guesting, because you can grow your business by appearing. It's a PR play, PR for podcasting, and you can grow your business and generate leads and sales by using podcast guesting as another marketing channel. We don't think it should be your only marketing channel. We think, and we work with our business owners on how podcast guesting can work with those multiple channels, whether it's paid ads, whether it's SEO, whether it's email newsletters, whatever it is. So we work very targeted with other people's marketing channels to be able to grow their business. It's just the format that we've been able to grow a business ourselves is around podcast guesting.
Who in podcasting are the best, get the best ROI, the best return, the best bang for the buck? Who benefits the most from doing a podcast?
We target two different audiences. We've got two different avatars. One is a corporate that wants to be in the media ecosystem. I recently was on a webinar by Edison Research, which was saying that podcasting has become mainstream. And now that it's now a much wider audience, all of the demographics are listening and watching podcasts. I think that it's super important that we understand that podcasting is something that's here now and is going to continue to grow. But the other avatar is growing businesses, people that want to generate leads and sales and want to get their message out to show their expertise, their experience, and their knowledge. So that second avatar, which is our primary focus, is that we want to help people to be able to grow their business. And one of the great ways of being able to do it is by getting on podcasts. And it's most cases, most of our clients are producing evergreen content. They're not trying to hack into news trends or anything like that. So they're able to talk with their experience and expertise about a subject. And by doing that, and as I said, working with other marketing channels, you need so many touch points now in the media. Like it used to be 7 touch points. That I read something recently, it's now 14 to 20 touch points. So that's for them to be able to be in that space where someone might want to buy. They can use podcast guesting and repurposing content, which is one of the best strategies of being on a podcast as a guest, using those strategies to be able to get more touch points that people are ready to be able to buy. And that can be layered in a funnel style that you're on a podcast. You might get the podcast, you might get the YouTube channel, but then you then have to have a landing page or use your website and then be able to then move people, maybe do a giveaway, whether it's an excerpt from your book or whether it's an ebook or a PDF that you're sharing. So moving people down from relatively passive as a podcast listener down into getting to the point where people are then able to buy your product or service.
So this is a strong channel. I'm gauging from what you're saying is it's one of the layers of the content, but it also evokes or builds trust. And if I kind of step back and look at the most famous people or the names, if you say the name, all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, I recognize that person. It doesn't necessarily mean you're into wrestling. You'll see his name pop up. There are other people that have strong brands. When you have a guest coming in, is it that they're looking to be that person, or are they looking to have that trust impact? Or is it just, it's part of the journey of the marketing content? Either someone seeking to have a solution to a problem, or they're promoting a solution that people might not know that here's a problem that they're having, and this is the answer to it.
So in my view, for podcast guesting and being on a podcast, it's all about trust and credibility. So you want to be able to get people to listen to what you're saying and understand where you're coming from. And that's backed up by the experience and the expertise that you have. So for me, it's super important that people are building that trust and credibility on those shows. And then when you're listening to these shows, you might be thinking, actually, I know what that person's talking about. I know what that guest is talking about. I have that problem as well. like their target audience that they're talking about, that they're looking to, their ideal client, that's me. That's who I am. I've got that same problem. So that's where podcast guesting can be. And there's a lot of research that's coming out at the moment, is that having longer format conversations has a much greater impact. We all understand about personal brands being a lot more important. In a lot of cases, you look at people with channels on X, on LinkedIn, places like that, the companies perform less effectively than personal brands. So being part of that personal brand for your business is now so much more important than it ever was before. So building that trust and credibility and finding pain points of listeners is by far the best way of being an effective podcast guest to be able to grow your business.
Have you found a client or clients that have let you brag that had an aha moment and you took them from obscurity to known and they credit you?
Look, all of our clients get ROI on what they're looking for. Some people have different goals. Some people are just wanting to educate because the product or service they've got needs an element of education to be able to then buy. Some people are doing very obvious things and therefore they want to just be out there and be able to talk about their product. Leadership coach that we worked with a few years ago, he really did well and was on some great shows. He then partnered with one of the podcasters to create a course, which has done amazing things for him. There's a digital marketing and e-commerce business that we worked with, and they wanted to get exposure for their marketing agency, and they were able to grow their business by working with us. So we've got a number of, and if you look at our website and our places on LinkedIn and things like this, there's a smattering of testimonials of people that have been have enjoyed the process as well. Some people are like, oh, I'm surprised how much I enjoyed it. And I'd say to them, you're talking about stuff that lights your fire, your business. Like, if you can't get excited about talking about your business, then maybe you're doing the wrong thing. So we've worked with change consultants, like culture transformation consultants, lawyers, accountants, tech companies, SaaS companies, marketers, digital marketers, foot franchise companies. There is a lot of people that we work with that have grown their personal brand and as a result been able to get leads and sales from working with us. And we're really proud of that. We're really proud that we're focused on business owners, because there's a myriad of other shows that are pure entertainment. And there has to be an element of entertainment in a podcast, but we're working with business owners in a serious way to use podcast guesting to be able to grow their business.
So how do you find that? It sounds like almost like a speed dating. How do you find the right podcast platform? Like, you've done introductions to folks for this podcast.
Yeah.
It's worked out great. How do you go about going, you do this and this is the perfect environment? Like, how do you match that? How do you make sure that, yeah, it's going to work? You can't absolutely guarantee it because two people can meet and they go, eh. But usually you're going to assume that you have a really good success rate. Otherwise you wouldn't be in business.
Yeah, we can't guarantee any shows. To tell a silly example, a coach that was looking to work with us said, oh yeah, I listened to some shows. I'm like, great. That's a great sign for us. Share some of the shows that you listen to. And oh, these are the shows I want to be on. And I'm not joking. Diary of a CEO, Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, the top 1%ers. And I was like, look, I think we need to manage your expectations a little bit there. So you do get sometimes these situations, but in most cases, people come with realistic expectations. I spend an hour with every one of our new clients, which is packed full of content. We talk about equipment. We talk about calls to action. We talk about key messaging, rapport with host. We talk about coaching and how to be able to get those key messages out at the right points to really tell your story, talk about your business. So everyone gets that 60 minutes with me. And then it's really just being able to build up their confidence and make sure they are primed and ready to be on shows that they can then get what their ROI is, what their purpose of being a guest. And some people are wanting to give back to the entrepreneurial community. They've been there, done it, sold businesses, and they're like, now I just want to be on shows and I might impact one or two people for talking about how I started a business, how I grew the business, how I scaled the business, how I sold the business. So everyone comes with a slightly different plan and what their goals are. And that's what we talk about on that first 60 minutes, is really understanding what the goals and the expectations of our clients are. And if we can marry what their goals and expectations are with a success rate of appearing on fantastic shows, and we agree a niche with them. So whether it's business, entrepreneurship, marketing, tech, data, cloud, whatever it is. And then we then assess after that 60 minutes and getting to know them a little bit, I'll then work out how I think the type of shows, the level of the type of shows that they can get on. And it's all done by a ranking score that we have a directory that every podcast globally is on. And we work out where we think we can push them to as highest as we can. And we pitch to those shows. And we say, we've got this person, we think it'd be a great fit for your show because of these reasons. Are you interested? And then the podcaster then replies yes or no. And if it's a yes, then a calendar link gets shared and the podcaster's happy they've got a great interview, and the guests are happy that they've gone on a really great show that they think will help them be able to grow their business.
One thing that I like about podcasting is the idea of being able to hone in the niche so that you're talking to the interested listener, not accidentally, but that he's left-handed and stands 5'11" and has red hair or whatever. One thing that does interest me is on promoting the podcast. Sometimes the guest does nothing. Sometimes the guest is amazing. Sometimes they think we're going to make them famous and rich. How do you lay out who is to promote the guest after the podcast?
So we have best practices that we share with all of our clients. And one of them is, you've had the privilege to go on their show. Please do something on the promotion side. So when it's released, if you're notified of when the podcast is going to be released, we actively promote for our clients that they should be liking, sharing, posting about that episode, because you've gone on a great show and it's only the right thing to do. And the thing is, like me being on your show, I'm hacking into your audience. You've got loyal listeners that have been listening for a while to your show. So I'm getting to your audience. It's only fair and a best practice to then be able to say, this show's been released, they'll like on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or wherever you're active on. It's the right thing to do, is to be able to respond rightly by liking, sharing, reposting, posting your own show on there as well. So it's a best practice that we actively promote for our guests, our clients to do.
There are certain industries that are more ideally suited to being on a podcast and getting that word out versus other industries.
Do you know what? There isn't really an ideal, like our ideal client is a business owner, but the industry they're in can be anything at all. We've had wellness, health and wellness, as I listed out before, nutrition bar, foot franchise, lawyers, accountants. It actually doesn't necessarily matter what their expertise is. What we do when we're on the sort of leads and sales conversations is have a look at the niche that they are going into. So if it's an area that we don't think we would be able to supply because there's not enough shows in that niche, then we'll be open and honest with them and say, look, we don't think this would work because there aren't that many shows in your niche. But it could be marketeers, it could be SaaS companies, it could be that there is enough. There are, and we always can go back to business and entrepreneur shows. If it is a very narrow niche, and we'll target those areas first, but sometimes we have to broaden it out to business and entrepreneur shows because there's volume there. And if you're doing like that, we worked with this guy who was a change consultant, like a transformation of culture within organizations. Now, there weren't that many shows in his particular niche, but we agreed that we would attack those shows. We would reach out to those shows first. So that's what we did. And then we then said to them, look, to be honest, we've got you on some really great shows here. Your target audience are probably listening to business shows as well, because they're looking to build their knowledge and their understanding of certain areas. So we think you should go on broader business shows. So sometimes the niche can be very narrow. Sometimes people are just open to go, I'm a marketeer, but business shows are great because I can then talk about marketing, because everyone needs to get the right marketing strategy. So I'm happy to go on more broader business shows, because there isn't a single person out there that's running a business that doesn't need effective marketing. So we work with our clients and then keep them updated on how we're targeting shows, and get that understanding with them that sometimes they can be very narrow, but sometimes they have to broaden out as well.
Have you ever, in that whole process, especially if someone is like, I deal with people that are left-handed, red-haired, 5'11". If they have such a tight niche, do you help them start up a podcast then? Is that another part of the journey?
It's part of the conversations that we're having with them, that whether the niche is very narrow or whether it's broader out. So you have to be realistic with them. As I said, there was another lady that we worked with who was looking at being able to, she was a coach, an executive coach that was looking for particular sort of C-suite executives. So we looked at leadership shows. Now, leadership is relatively broad. There's a lot of shows that touch on that leadership. So we were able to explain to her, look, we've got this volume of leadership shows. We'll definitely go and look to get you on those type of shows first. And she was incredibly happy. She got on some really great shows that was able to, she ended up signing a contract with a big East Coast bank. And she finished her contract with us, and we had the sort of follow up at the end of the contract. And she said, I can't do any shows. I've got to write this whole curriculum for this corporate. We let her do that. And that was a long time that she was off our radar. But then she reached out to us and said, look, this is coming to an end. I need to make sure my pipeline is working right. Can I start going on more shows again? And she did.
But would you have suggested to her to create her own podcast where she becomes the focal point of the expertise, but talks to other people and then just feathers the nest with other outside entities?
So you'll know this, Bernie and Wayne. Doing your own show is very labor intensive. Even if you outsource parts of it, you still have to research. You still have to get better as a communicator, as a host, interviewing people, or even if you're doing shorter episodes just about a particular narrow theme or niche. If people come after a contract and say, we'd like to do our own show, which has happened. We've got 2 podcast production companies that we connect people with. And we say, look, if you want to do a show, absolutely. Why don't you go and speak to these companies and they might be able to help you do that. The reason why podcast guesting can be so effective is once you've got your stories nailed down and you've done the prep work, then and you're comfortable to ad lib and be able to communicate lots of different areas and be comfortable of pivoting in a conversation, there isn't actually that much preparation that needs to be done for it. You're not editing, you're not doing post-production, you're not doing the show notes, you're not publishing, you're not promoting. It's a labor of love to do your own podcast. And if people really want to do that, then we'll 100% support them and encourage them to do that. But the reason why we target business owners is they're running a business. They might not have the time available to them to do their own show. So we'll have an open and frank conversation. We actually had someone on a sales call quite recently who was swaying between, shall he do his own show or shall he be a podcast guest? And I had an honest and frank conversation with them. I was like, you're aware of the time commitment to doing your own show? He said yes. He wanted to do a solo show that it would just be him talking about particular subjects. And I didn't talk him out of being a podcast guest. I just laid both examples out there. And I said, look, if you want to be a guest, first of all, or you want to do the guesting where you can talk more about you and your business, come and work with us. If you want a longer term play, if you want to spend the time or outsource to the right people the elements of being a podcast, then do that as well, or do that first. So he actually decided to do his own podcast, and he's in process at the moment working with one of the production companies on building out that as a show himself. So yeah, either or. Like, I'm a podcaster myself. I see the value in being a podcaster. So I'm not although we'd love to have worked with him, because I think we could have worked really well with him, but sometimes you just have to realize relationships are more important than necessarily pressing people into a sale. So if this person wanted to do a podcast, look, all power to them. Hopefully they'll do 50, 100, 200, 500 episodes, and he'll have a great experience doing that. So yeah, sometimes you have to just bank on the doing the right thing and making sure that people are comfortable in what they're doing is sometimes more important than pressing someone into a sale.
What's the name of your podcast?
It's called Business Growth Talks. It's about growing and scaling businesses. So on the show, I have people either have been there, done that, grown the business, and as I said, give back to the community, or they're actually growing and scaling a business. And I talk about three things: their personal journey, I talk about how they serve their clients, and how they grew their business. And for me, that really encapsulates the whole idea, the whole premise of a business show. And if you're looking for hints, tips, strategies, they're there. If you're looking to be inspired by someone that maybe didn't come from much and that's become very successful, or you just want to be entertained by listening to stories, people come and they listen. And I have some great guests on my show as well. It's been going for 7.5 years, and I'm incredibly proud of it.
So as a podcaster, I have some opinions, but I'd love to hear yours. What should a guest bring to the table before they do the podcast to make as good a podcast as possible?
I think it's at the start, it's preparation. So we talk to our clients about getting 5 or 6 key stories that they want to be able to communicate to show, as I said, experience, expertise, and knowledge. So we actively, especially the guys that haven't done any shows before, we work with them to make sure they're primed and ready for the show. So for me, I'm telling them, get 5 or 6 stories, whether it's jotted down on a piece of paper, on a second screen, or you've memorized it, and get comfortable with that. People that have done shows, it's a natural flow state that they get into. And therefore, they don't have to have that sort of element of preparation because they've got a million stories to be able to tell. So it really depends on what level you're on of experience as being a podcast guest. But yeah, there's simple, quick things. As I say, there's an exercise that we do, all the aspects of your life. So for me, I'm a business owner, I'm a podcaster, I'm a podcast guest. I've got a family, I've got dogs, I'm a rugby coach. And all of those different aspects of your life, write down some stories and think about whether they would be relevant or interesting to tell on a podcast. And that's a great way of being able to brainstorm that idea of every aspect of your life, how you can bring those in on stories and make them relevant to, if it's a business, how it impacted you. So I've recently started coaching my daughter in rugby. So I'm a big rugby union fan, have been all my life. And my daughter decided at 10 years old, she's now 12, that she wanted to do rugby. And at the time I was a passive father. I just turned up, watched, and then they asked me to get involved last year. So that's been great for me to work with younger people, think about how to communicate to them as well, technical things, trying to simplify them, they can understand as a 10, 11, 12-year-old. So as I say, like that whole exercise of thinking about different aspects of your life, that coaching element has really helped me in my business, because it like that whole simplifying things for children is a really great way of trying to explain your business. If you can explain your business to a 12-year-old, you've got a much better chance of being obvious and concise and interesting for them. Then you've got a good chance of being able to communicate to everyone, because you're making it a message that can be understood, whatever level of understanding or education that you have.
You mentioned the word story, and we've had some people that were really good at it. It's almost like watching a really good comedian. They'll cut a joke, then go off on the journey of other jokes, and then they come back and they tie it in. So it brings you in, and it's one format. Do you coach them on the story? In other words, tell me something, and then you go, okay, reframe it this way. Do you help coach them through that space? And some people, they'll have a story, but they just talk straight flat. There's no undulation in the voice. And it reminds me of a math teacher where, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Do you help them through that?
So there's an element of X factor, which I can't control. I can get people prepared, but they've got to be able to think about it a little bit as a performance. When you were asking the question, I was thinking a friend of mine who's been on lots of shows went in and did a comedy improvisation course, because he wanted to be able to be a better performer. So you don't have to go to that extreme, but I think the whole element of storytelling. So you tell me, if I tell you a fact, there's now 560 million listeners of podcasting currently at the moment. Right. And you go, okay, that's vast, isn't it? That's a huge number that we're now talking about are listening to podcasts globally. But even if I then tell you a story of how someone, like the whole idea of improv, that they wanted to be a better performer, and because they now see that podcasting is a growing medium, it's mainstream. It's now officially mainstream. I was on a webinar and they've now said that it's now a mainstream media. But if I tell you that someone went on an improv course because they wanted to be a better communicator and be able to think on their feet, and then suddenly that listener, like one of your listeners, might be sitting there thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to do speaking gigs. I want to be a podcast guest. How am I going to be able to make myself fluid and have the ability to be able to think on my feet? I'm going to do an improv course. And you do it for 6 months or whatever it is. You learn how to think about things off the top of your head and be able to then relate to stories in your own life. And so there might be someone listening at the moment that sat there and go, yeah, that's what I want. And that's the power of being storytelling and being on podcasts, is that you can affect people's decisions on what they're doing, whether it's buying your product or service, or whether it's a story that makes you, if you're a marketeer, makes you think about SEO or makes you think about newsletters, whatever it is. By being able to give an example of someone that you've either worked with or that can do that and has done, that's where you get resonation, and that's where your credibility and trust comes in, when you can tell a story that can change the way people are thinking.
A lot of people are talking about things they don't understand. Is AI going to affect the podcasting guest spot?
AI is affecting everything, every form of business and entertainment it's affecting. It can be a really valuable tool, hugely valuable tool. I use it all the time. ChatGPT, I'm using almost daily for ideation, thinking about things. It's just a great, fantastic tool. It's brilliant for doing show notes, first drafts, right? You can't just totally rely on AI. That's the thing that there is a caveat there. It's a great starting point, but it shouldn't be, because you want to be able to make it into the way you communicate and the authenticity of communicating. So it's a great way to start posts. It's a great way to think about questions as a podcast host. It's a great way of having show notes and keywords for your show. But it shouldn't be the only method that you use. You have to make it authentic to yourself as well. So I think it is impacting podcasting. And another quick story. There's a guy who's unfortunately passed away called Michael Parkinson. So he had a chat show called Parky, and it was like 90s, late 80s, like 90s. He did it for 15 years. He was brilliant. A very relaxed older guy that just had this wonderful way of being able to ask really interesting, pertinent questions. So one of the things that someone's done is they've created Michael Parkinson AI. So guys, look up Parky or Michael Parkinson UK interviewer on YouTube and you'll see videos and you'll see sort of clips of him. So what they've done is they've created an AI version of Parky. And so he is now interviewing people, real famous people now in the UK. And it's in essence, an AI chatbot, but it doesn't have a set number of questions. It will have information that you put into it, but then it spontaneously asks questions in the style and the sound as Michael Parkinson. And there will be a time where there'll be AI talking to AI. But the great thing about podcasting is I think there still is always going to be a human element of it. The successful ones need the authenticity of the host, needs the authenticity of the guest to be able to talk about a subject. So yes, it's impacting everything. Yes, it is massively impacting podcasting. But why I still love podcasting and I run a business there, I still do my own show, is that the human authenticity of longer format conversations is why people love podcasts. And I don't think that will change with AI.
What's the perfect length for a podcast then? Because you know what? I'll leave it at that because it might. Yeah. What's the perfect length for a podcast?
Oh, there isn't. That doesn't exist. If you've got a show on, I don't know, SEO for websites, you only want 20 minutes every episode. A friend of mine also does a health and wellness, like positivity podcast, and she releases 3 or 4 minutes every day. And that's only 3 minutes. I remember a long time ago, Entrepreneur on Fire, John Lee Dumas he does 7 shows a week, so 1 every day, but he created it for 20 minutes so he could, on his commute to work. So people driving for 20 minutes, they can listen to an episode. My show is a 45-minute to 60-minute episode. Now, we're going a lot deeper than John Lee Dumas does on Entrepreneur on Fire because I want to know the backstory. I want to understand, I want to go deep into their area of expertise. I want to know how they've evolved as a leader. I want to know what their risk appetite is. What's been their biggest challenge they've faced? So for me, that's 60 minutes. You've then got your Joe Rogans and Tim Ferriss's and sometimes Diary of a CEO, which is like 2.5 hours, 3 hours. So I think that's the beauty of it as well, is that there is so many different ways of doing it. And there's not a perfect way of doing it. I've been working very hard in the last 12 months or over 12 months about my YouTube channel, and I've grown it hugely and went from 89 subs to, I think we're about 22,000 subs in about 12 months. So we know that YouTube tells us perfect episode is 15 to 20 minutes, right? That's what the data is telling us. But podcasting, the thing with podcasts, the thing with YouTube is podcasting on YouTube is now doing really well because people are doing blasts of it. They'll do 30 minutes and in between a meeting or while they're working, they'll listen to something and then come back for the second episode. And that happens on podcasting as well. But that's why I love it. There's so many different varieties and ways and formats that whatever works for you, you can produce it, and the consumer side, they have that greater variety of, they know that there might be a show that they listen to every day for 3 minutes, but then once a week, they'll listen to a 60-minute episode as well. And that's why I don't think there is a perfect format, and that you should just do what, as a podcast host, creator, You should do what you want to do, how you think it should be, and there will be listeners for you.
One last question from my end. So, podcast, typically audio. You mentioned YouTube. So the video element, do you see that kind of drifting from audio to video? Or it doesn't matter? It's both feet in two different areas and two different audience types.
I've got to be like, there are people out there that believe podcasting is an RSS feed, is an audio only channel. I don't believe that. I believe you go where your audience is. And therefore the advent of YouTube means that more people are now watching podcasts than ever before. But what I also know is the discoverability on YouTube is much better than Apple or Spotify or any other platform. So for me, I want to be on YouTube. So when people are searching business growth, they might get my show pop up. Now, their experience might be of watching an episode or a part of an episode and really liking it. And then they are going to the gym and they want to listen to a podcast. They're walking the dog. They want to listen to a podcast. They're commuting. They're doing their shopping. They're doing their food for their evening meal, and they'll listen to a podcast. So I think it can be worked together. It's not an either or. And I think the people that are saying that it should only be audio only are wrong. So I see it as a complementary way of getting your show out to a wider audience by leveraging YouTube as well.
So we're on Zoom in 2 different continents, but is there a geography you tend to like to specialize in, and how do we get a hold of you?
So for the show, for the Business Growth Talks, it's very much UK, US, but it's a global show. YouTube as well, heavily English speaking locations. For our business, as I said earlier, my business partner is based in the US. He's in Tampa, Florida. So we have a cross-Atlantic business and we do prioritize US clients. So a lot of our marketing is channeled towards the US market. So I think we're about 80% of our clients are US based, but that doesn't mean that's exclusive. We have UK clients. We've had a guy that was a Brit that was living in Singapore. We had a US guy that was living in Taiwan. We've had an Australian guy that's been with our shows as well. It is a global medium, and I think we should be embracing that. But yeah, for the podcast introduction, we do prioritize US. It's a larger market, and it just works a lot better for us. But we are flexible on location. And where you can find me, so you can go to our website, podcastintroduction.com. You can put in a contact us. You can set up a call with us on there. Or I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So if you DM me, connect with me and DM me and say that you came from this podcast or from podcast guesting, whatever it is, very happy to connect with you on LinkedIn, and we can start the conversation there.
I want to say thank you to Mark Hayward, my co-host Wayne Pratt, and you, the Knack for Business listeners. So you got a business, you want to promote it, you want to be on a podcast, and you're going, how do I shop this out? Reach out to Mark. That's what his company's built to do. And he can help you make those connections deeper and your breadth of knowledge more shared.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at infoviewcreativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayneamotive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, Motive8UCA. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people: Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert; Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host; Jovan Strika from Allhive, a co-working space that is more than just a space; then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner; and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer: Please note that the NAC 4 Business Podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.